What I do, coin traders, thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at Algorand ALGO on that ticker, currently right around the 25.6 cent level. And one of the things we are seeing for Algorand, as well as a lot of altcoins and cryptos in the space right now, is just kind of the apparent formation of a little bit more of this rising wedge, which is a little bit interesting since the path initially was heading up. So you can see it does form kind of more or less like an arrow, where we have kind of a linear trend, and then we do start to form this rising wedge. So we are going to be looking at what happens here with the price, especially with the upcoming FOMC meeting here in just a few days. So for example, if we do look at the apex of this rising wedge, then we're pretty much looking at beginning of February, about the 3rd or 4th or so, or something like that. And I do anticipate probably having a better and pretty much more clear direction after the FOMC meeting. And I think a lot of buying right now on this final leg has been a little bit more of that priced in, anticipating good news coming out. So I think if it's anything other than that, we're probably going to get a pretty steep sell-off out of this wedge. But keep in mind too, with that, we are going to have plenty of support from these exponential moving averages coming to the downside, which does mean a retracement and a test, a back test anyway, which is still going to be needed nonetheless. So definitely not going to be any signs of a big pullback just yet if that does in fact happen. And so do want to flip over into the weekly since we did just close the weekly. So now we're looking at, after 5 bullish weeks in a row, just starting out the week a little bit of a pullback. But like we said, we are still anticipating a lot of directional clarity based after the FOMC meeting, since that is the highlight event for the upcoming week. So if we do zoom out here, you can see that the last big attempt that we have seen in between this 12 and 26 period exponential moving average has been met with pretty big resistance. So we have seen Algorand get rejected from this 26 period exponential moving average. And so specifically even the last 2 attempts too. So back in the end or middle of September, that's when we also saw a rejection just above the 12 period exponential moving average. So since we haven't really established that much momentum to the upside, we are still getting rejected heavily in this overall area. And if we actually go ahead and turn on volume here for this week as well, do need to point out and highlight how for the last 3 weeks we have been seeing decreasing bullish volume. So a little bit more of that exhaustion as we do enter this big resistive territory. And so specifically up overhead too on this weekly, going to be looking at a big resistance point up overhead right at the 28.2 cent level, which looking left was our extreme point of support prior to this big FTX flush that created a lot of downside to the 16 cent support we saw. Now, so the good thing about the weekly so far is that if we look at all of these weeklies that have closed so far, we're seeing a higher weekly on each candle to the upside right now. So we actually are going to have to, at some point, see a weekly pullback that's actually going to be a new low on each of the weekly candles, which will confirm a higher low over the bottom support. So at some point, we are going to have to see that happen. And so right now, obviously, we are only a few hours into the current daily candle and the weekly candle actually, so still got basically a full week ahead. But just know that especially after 5 weeks of upside, we are going to have to at some point find a new low to ultimately form a higher low on this retracement, since it's been nothing but continuous upside from here. So like I said, if the FOMC meeting doesn't go as optimistically as a lot of us think, or even if it's not necessarily as extremely bullish, then a lot of that will be already priced in, and I would anticipate that being a very good catalyst to drive a potential bearish break to the downside and create that low to test some supports and confirm a higher low. So now, since we are still on the 2-day chart, let's go ahead and talk about the volume here, because like we talked about on the weekly, decrease in bullish volume. So a lot of that selling exhaustion to the upside. And so especially if we look overhead, going to be extremely strong resistance level up at 26 cents as well, because looking left, big point of closing support on this 2-day chart prior to a big flush that led us down to our 16 cent low. So up overhead from 26 cents up until about 28, just over 28, is going to be an extremely strong resistance zone for Algorand. And so especially with a little bit of selling exhaustion from this decreased volume, we are going to need a great news catalyst announcement in order to actually blast through this level and see higher highs, potentially up to the 30 cent level. So personally, I don't really see that happening without an extremely good news announcement out of the FOMC meeting, which I also don't personally see. And so that's why I will think we'll be looking for here before too long, being able to pull back and establish that higher low. Now, if we want to go ahead and look at the Fibonacci retracement from the high right before the FTX flush from the high down to the low at 16 cents, Then we can see this move actually past the 23.6 and now finding a very big resistance zone in between 23.6 and 38.2. But if we actually remove the high and actually make it go down to where we saw the close on this 2-day, and then also where we saw the close in terms of support, you can see that right now we're actually forming a very nice point at 38.2, which is where we are in fact finding resistance. Price for that is coming in at 26.22. But so if we actually go back down again to the extreme low point as well as the trend high, then I do want to point out that 38.2 is going to be right at 27.3. So we know that 27.3 is going to be another big significant resistance zone as well. So pretty much everything from the current 26, 26.22, 27.3, and then all the way up to 28.2 as well. Going to be an extremely strong resistance zone. And without a lot of big bullish news catalyst information to come out, it's just not really likely right now that we'll be able to continue plowing up. Now, not to say, obviously, of course, that can't happen, but it's just not one of the most likely scenarios right now. And of course, would love to know everyone's thoughts down in the comments sections. So do want to point out right now as we switch over to the 12-hour chart, how we're still very much in this longer-term strong uptrend. So as looking on the 12-hour, we're still setting very nice highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. So you get the picture. So we really can't see a continuation to the downside unless we actually break this trend, which does call for breaking the shorter-term trends first. So as you can see right now, we've actually been establishing very nice support and a guide along these exponential moving averages. So we're seeing support on the 12 and 26. We're seeing support above the 50. Now, once again, above the 26, and then been finding support on this 12 period. So really know that even if we do set a temporary top, it's still just to retrace and set a higher low. So low that we're looking at right now, based on the previous pullback, is still going to be 22.89. So we have a significant amount of retracement in order to still maintain a higher low. And that's the important thing to always look at, is whether or not we're still maintaining that trend. Because as long as you are, the trend is still your friend. And so even now, we could be looking at a potential 10% pullback to still be maintaining a higher low. Now, given the fact that we have found support on top of the 26 period exponential moving average, that would be extremely favorable if we did actually maintain that. Typically, what we do have happen, though, is a pullback to the 50, pullback to the 26, and then a pullback to the 12. So right now, we're actually looking at the 12, and if we draw a price level resistance for what came in earlier, especially on this 12-hour, then we're looking at a resistance point of about 25.28. So big point of resistance before pulling back, kicking off the 26, and then now finding upside, breaking through that resistance point, and then back testing that as support, which also should align to this 12-period exponential moving average. So right now, the big resistance point that I'm looking at, or actually support rather, is going to be the previous resistance right at that 25.28. I think if that does break, then the next line that we are going to be looking at is pretty much right around the 25-cent psychological. So then if that does break, then we would be pulling back and actually looking at a low of about 23.83, which is this low, which also should align with still support in between the 12, 26, and 50 period exponential moving averages. So should that level break as well, then it would still be looking down at about 22.89, which once again is where we found this pullback, kicking off the 26 period EMA and still maintaining a 12-hour higher low compared to our previous 12-hour pullback. So as you can see, still plenty of support opportunities in order to pull back and actually maintain that trend and still see higher highs on top of 26.5. And then still testing some of the strong resistance points up overhead all the way up to 28.2. But like we said, we are still riding this very nice support line to the upside. But as well, we're also going to have a big resistance trend up ahead, which is what we are kicking off of right now. So should we pull back to the 12-period EMA, that would actually intersect nicely with this trend line and allow for the next upside move. Like we mentioned, though, at some point, we are still going to have to test a higher low on the weekly. So that is still a big factor that we're going to have to look out for here in the coming weeks. But for now, like we said, we are still maintaining that uptrend. So no signs of that happening just yet, because we are going to have to break out of that 12-hourly trend in order to first pull back and start looking for a pullback to set a weekly higher low. So we'll be keeping everyone updated as we do get minutes for the announcements and all of that for the FOMC. But otherwise, do let me know your questions, comments, issues, and disagreements down in the comments sections below. And also, if you did find value in the video today, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. Do appreciate all the continued love and support. As always, means so much. Stay safe, take care, and I'll catch you back in the next video.